Welcome to season 9 of the Bare Marriage Podcast. I'm Sheila Ray Gregoire from baremarriage.com, where we'd like to talk about healthy, evidence-based biblical advice for your sex life and your marriage. And Rebecca, I think this is season 9.
It is.
It is our first one back since the summer.
That's very exciting.
I know. I hope people missed us.
I'm sure that they did. Yes.
And I know that, and I hope that they were reading all the fiction books that you talked about on the last podcast of the season at the end of June. And it's now the beginning of August. And we've spent a little bit of time relaxing, kind of, but we're also getting ready to move and do a whole bunch of stuff in our personal life.
There's a lot going on in our personal lives, which means this has been the least relaxing time in our entire life.
Yes. But as we are back here for season 9, and I think season 9 is kind of arbitrary. Like, I don't even know when we began counting seasons.
I think we retconned it quite a bit. We're like, that's about a season, right? Like, that can count.
Yeah, and so we are starting a new season, but I actually do have a bit of a plan.
Okay.
I have a theme that I want to talk about for the first few weeks of this season, which is how do we change people's minds? You know, because so many people are deep into this idea that sex is primarily about men, that men have needs that women have to fulfill, that men are in authority over women, that women can't speak up, and it's hurting people.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. A very power-hungry focus on how the world works. The idea that there is a right way and we have to make everyone conform to the right way, even if it's hurting them, because it's the right way.
Yeah, because it's what God says, even though it's not.
No.
And so, like, that's one of the things we've been trying to do with our books, with The Great Sex Rescue, with She Deserves Better, with The Marriage You Want, is like, how do we break through that and say, hey, there's a Jesus way. There's a better way that is in line with Scripture, is in line with Jesus, but that actually helps you flourish. And it's like, how do we break through and get people to see that? And so this is like the $64,000 question that keeps me up at night. This is what we talk about in all our staff meetings, is like strategy and just what else can we do? And so I thought for the first few weeks, we could actually look at that idea of how do we change people's minds. And I want to do something I've never done before in this podcast.
Okay.
I want to actually run through an entire book on this podcast that I am so excited about. So let me give you a bit of background.
Awesome.
Okay. I was on social media and people were talking about this book. I don't even remember why. I think it was something to do with evangelicals. And someone was saying, everyone needs to read this book, The Authoritarians. It's free.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, I like free stuff. So I clicked, and it was written by a man named Bob Altmeier, who was a professor for 40 years at the University of Manitoba. I don't know if he's passed away now or if he's retired.
He has. I
think he may have passed away recently, but if you haven't, Bob, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm so sorry.
But but he was at the end of his career when he wrote this back in 2006. And he spent 40 or 45 years studying authoritarianism. And specifically what makes people like gravitate towards authoritarian leaders. Yeah. And what can we do to stop it? So let's understand it, and what can we do to stop it? And in his book, he goes through what authoritarianism is, how people become authoritarian, what it has to do with religion, which is what I really want to talk about, and then how do we get people out of it?
Yeah.
So I want to walk through each of those things. Before we start, Rebecca, do you remember what year I said this was written in?
2006.
2006. So people, as I read quotes from the book, and as we talk about the book, please remember that it was written in 2006.
Yep.
And nobody get upset because I'm saying things about...
All we're saying is we're reading a book about authoritarianism and about the rise of like scary authoritarian systems. And so if you see anything echoed, and maybe take note.
Yes, but
this was written in 2006.
This was not written about
I hadn't even gotten
situation.
My first training bra yet.
Yeah.
Like
yes, it was written quite a while ago. And University of Manitoba is near and dear to my heart.
Yeah.
That is where my aunt and uncle met. That's where my mother and father are both graduates of University of Manitoba. My dad later went on to Harvard. So they were actually there at the same time as this guy was teaching. So it's kind of cool. You know, I think my mom might even have taken a course by him.
Wouldn't that be cool?
Yeah. So this is Bob Altemeyer, University of Manitoba, taught there for 40 years, and he wrote this in 2006. Okay, so his basic thesis is that authoritarians are people who, because of their personality, submit by leaps and bounds to authorities. Okay, and I'm going to read.
That's
what
interesting,
he
because
says.
we often think that authoritarians are the ones wielding the hammer, but
Right.
actually the authoritarians are the ones yielding to the hammer.
Exactly, because the people, like the people in power, couldn't stay in power without people supporting them.
Absolutely.
And so, this was a huge area of study after World War II. Is like, how did people support Hitler? How were people supporting Stalin? And the USSR was really big at this time. Like how can we, not in 2006, but when this guy was writing, how do we combat this? How do we stop people from following these ideologues? And he says, authoritarian followers usually support the established authorities in their society, such as government officials and traditional religious leaders. Such people have historically been the proper authorities in life, the time-honored, entitled, customary leaders, and that means a lot to most authoritarians. Psychologically, these followers have personalities featuring 1, a high degree of submission to the established legitimate authorities in their society, 2, high levels of aggression in the name of their authorities, and 3, a high level of conventionalism, meaning like they want to be seen as this is the way we always do things.
Yep, they're traditionalists.
They're
That's why
traditionalists.
he studies right-wing authoritarianism.
Yeah, and he explains what he means by right wing, because when we hear right wing, we think politics. When he says right wing, what he means is the traditional definition of right wing, which goes back to the English word writ, W-R-I-T. So it's like conforming to the law.
Yep,
right.
which is also currently right-wing politics.
Yes, so it's like you can have communist. Right.
Yes.
So he developed the scale called the right wing authoritarianism scale, and you can have communists who are high on the RWA, and you can have conservatives who are high in the RWA. Okay, so what's really fun in this book, and I will share a link to it in the podcast notes, is there's several different tests that you can take. Okay, so there's first one is this test that he developed. Okay, and he's quite famous for developing it, called the authoritarianism test. And it's 22 questions, and I took it. And you took it. I don't know what you scored.
No, I don't know what you scored either.
Okay.
I'm probably going to be higher than you, I imagine, because I answered a lot of things neutral when I'm like, I disagree with the exact wording of that, so I guess neutral.
Yeah. So I scored a 60.
Oh, I'm 51.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dad scored 52. So you're basically...
Both of us are all... I looked up the distribution online. 13.5% of Americans score 66 or less.
60 or less?
66 or less.
66. Okay, so we're very low.
So we're in the 13.5. We would be, if we were American, we would be in essence in the 87th percentile for freedom.
Okay.
And and authoritarianism resistance.
Okay.
Yeah, we'd be in like the bottom 13th percentile, like percent of people when it comes to right-wing authoritarianism.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So super interesting. Now, here's something I thought was sort of funny that he shared.
Yes.
Is that people who score low on the RWA scale want to score low.
Yes.
People who score in the middle tend to want to score in the middle. People who score high tend to want to score in the middle.
That's really funny. They want to be seen as moderate.
Exactly.
But they're not moderate.
They want to be seen as the norm.
Yeah.
And I just think about that with and we're going to be getting into religion later on, but I think about that. Think about the way that that Christians often call themselves like the moral majority. We are, we're the quiet, the underground masses that all agree with us.
Yeah, it's like, no, you're high on this, buddy. Like you're scoring in the 97th percentile for authoritarianism.
Yeah.
You're not the moral majority.
Yeah. So do you want to explain to people how you make a scale? Because that's what this guy's famous for. So he was famous for validating this scale.
Yeah, so pretty much there's a bunch of different things that go into it. It's a very complicated procedure, but this is not just a test. It's not just a pop quiz, right? So what happens is over years and years of research, you figure out core concepts that predict future behavior and are very valid and reliable measures of whether or not you would fit into camp A or camp B.
Right.
So it's easiest to explain with medicine, right? So for example, if someone has a certain type of mass of cells in their breast tissue, right? That means they have breast cancer. So a good medical test would be able to differentiate people who have those cells from those who don't, so that we don't give chemotherapy, radiation, or mastectomies to people who don't have breast cancer.
Right.
So in psychology, it's often a lot more complicated because we're not dealing with is it there or is it not in the same way, right? So what ends up happening is you study people and you figure out do they become part of a libertarian militia? Do they try to overthrow the government?
Yeah, we just had forced soldiers in Canada arrested for that. Yeah,
exactly.
In Quebec.
Like, no, but like, do they have aggressive tendencies? Do they engage in very power-focused authority? Like, there's lots of different ways that you can validate these measures. And what they find is this question didn't really differentiate between the people who we know run militias to try to kill mayors and these people who are like free love hippies.
Right.
Answered the same. So this is not a very reliable or a very valid question. And over the years, you develop these tools so that they tell you, in essence, where you fall on the distribution of this specific concept. The one thing I will say, tools like this are not measures of what they are not measuring. So like you can't use measures of, for example, right-wing authoritarianism to measure whether or not you are, intelligent.
Right.
Whether or not, it doesn't mean that you're more or less educated than someone. It's about whether or not you're an authoritarian. Now, we can then look at whether or not authoritarianism correlates with education, but it's not, you can't use it to measure what it doesn't measure.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And often in these scales, one of the reasons that it is a scale is like those things go together. They correlate quite highly.
Yes, that's exactly the point. So all the questions that are on that are all different data points so that we can get to this relatively nebulous concept of authoritarianism. You don't have an authoritarianism gene, right? Like you don't look at someone like, sometimes you can look at someone and be like, they're authoritarianism. Yeah. But for the most part, there's not
like if someone does a Nazi salute, for instance.
That's okay. But but I think there's things that we measure that are not easy to always differentiate. And so you have to attack it from multiple data points, right? So one question on its own is not enough to say whether or not you're authoritarian. But it's like, okay, but if we have all these questions together and you get within this score range, chances are you're pretty low on the authoritarian. But if you're consistently ranking these high, you might have one or two outliers, but now you're authoritarian.
Right. Okay. So let's go on as to what authoritarianism is and why we should be concerned about it, because that's a big thesis of his book. So he says that one of the things that really dominates among high authoritarians is that they think they are the righteous. Yeah. So basically everybody, whether you score low on the scale or medium or high, everybody wants to think they're a little bit more moral than most people. Yeah. With the exception of high authoritarians who don't just think they're a little bit moral. They think, no, I am the righteous.
And they are the damned.
I am like, I am like major up here. I am a really...
Well, everyone should believe that they are acting more morally than other people, because you should be making choices that you feel are moral and that other people are not making.
Right.
Like, that actually is a healthy thing.
Yeah.
We should all be like, well, I'm doing this because I know it's the right thing to do, and other people aren't doing this. You should be doing things that you feel are the right thing to do, even if others don't do them. So, but there's a difference between the authoritarians aren't just like, well, I think I'm making better choices and I'm kind of a better person, but they're still like valid people. It's like, no, y'all shall burn.
Yeah, I am.
And I will
righteous.
dance as you burn.
Yeah, exactly. The other big difference is that authoritarians tend to be quite aggressive in how they live this out. And he says, I'm going to read this, what he said. When I say that they're aggressive, I don't mean they stride into bars and start fights. Yes. First of all, high RWAs go to church enormously more often than they go to bars. Okay. Secondly, they usually avoid anything approaching a fair fight. Instead, they aggress when they believe right and might are on their side. Right for them means more than anything else that their hostility is endorsed by established authority. Or support such authority, and might means they have a high physical advantage over their target in weaponry, say, or in numbers, as in a lynch mob.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So they think that they are the righteous, and they tend to be more aggressive about it.
Yeah.
And now I want to read to you about the experiment. And this is what was shared on social media, which is what really made me curious.
Cool.
And get the book, because this is fascinating. So what I want you to picture this University of Manitoba in the 70s. Okay. So he's starting to do this research on authoritarianism. They're developing this scale. They think they've got it validated, and they're able to identify which students are low on the low RWAs and which students are high RWAs. And at the same time, he's in the psychology department. There's another dude in the psychology department who's doing an experiment. Okay. And the experiment is called the global change game.
Yes.
And what he does is they get together and they decide they're going to have low RWAs take the global change game and high RWAs and see what happens. So this had never been done before. So I'm going to read to you I'm going to read to you what the global change game was. So this is from the book. The setting involved a rather sophisticated simulation of the Earth's future called the Global Change Game, which is played on a big map of the world by 50 to 70 participants who have been split into various regions such as North America, Africa, India, and China. The players are divided up according to current populations, so a lot more students hunker down in India than in North America. The game was designed to raise environmental awareness, and before the exercise begins, players study up on their region's resources, prospects, and environmental issues. Then the facilitators who service the simulation call for any member of each region, to assume the role of team leader by simply standing up. Once the elites in the world have risen to the task, they are taken aside and given control of their region's bank account. They can use this to buy factories, hospitals, armies, and so forth from the game bank, and they can travel the world making deals with other elites. They also discover that they can discreetly put some of their region's wealth into their own pockets to vie for a prize to be given out at the end of the simulation to the world's richest person. Then the game begins, and the world goes wherever the players take it for the next 40 years, which, because time flies in a simulation, takes about 2.5 hours. Okay? Now, they had been doing this simulation for years before Bob Altemeyer started sending groups of just low RWAs and just high RWAs.
Yes, it had always been kind of mixed groups.
Yes, yes. So he sent a group of low RWAs, okay? 67 of them who had all scored very low. And over the course of the game, they cured poverty. They, there were still some mass starvation events in Africa, but like other continents came in and tried to help. They fixed climate change. They invested in hospitals and education. They lifted people out of poverty. And by the end of the game, everybody was better. Okay. Every time high RWAs played the game, nuclear war broke out and killed everybody. Very, very quickly. And when that happened, the game people would stop the game and say, okay, here's what happened because of the nuclear war. You have the chance to go back 2 years and change it. And they would keep playing. Okay. And by the end of the game, everybody was heavily armed. They were all hunkered down in their own regions. There was mass starvation. There was mass climate catastrophes. And everybody had gone against their own interests in order to hoard resources. So it's like, and when people started realizing this, they sent many different groups, to play this game, and this kept happening over and over and over again. Low people on the RWAs ended up with a great world, and high ones destroyed it because they were just after their own interests. And so the question became, oh my gosh, this is dangerous. Like, people who are high RWAs are actually a danger to society. And so what are we going to do about it? And I know that's a harsh thing to say, but that's what this experiment showed. And I want to read you what he said about this. So he starts off by saying, and people may dispute this. People may say, well, it doesn't mean that authoritarians are always bad or anything like this. But here's his comment. If you set up a fair and square experiment in which people can act nobly, fairly, and with integrity, and you find that most of one group does and most of another group does not, that's a fact, not an opinion. And if you keep finding the same thing, experiment after experiment, and other people find it too, then that's a body of facts that demands attention.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think it is, we all want to believe that we're the good guys, right? And the problem is you have to ask, does the ends justify the means? Because that's what a lot of our right-wing authoritarianism says, right? I mean, I think about the kinds of things that you learn about in Sunday school, right? Where you even in a lot of these churches where they talk about the horrible things that happened with colonialism. And I say, yeah, but they became Christians. Like, that's not okay. Like, you can't say, oh, well, too bad everyone was murdered and raped and died horrible deaths and was sold as slaves and all these horrible things that happened, but at least they got to hear the gospel. No, the ends do not justify the means. Right? This is what we're talking about here. Say, well, we haven't had nuclear war. No, but we have had a lot of these other things that the church has glossed over in the name of conversions. And that's what this is measuring here, guys. Like, if you're someone who you're able to say, yeah, but at the end it'll be worth it. No, it won't. Like, that's the point. And that's a sign that you may want to reevaluate why you think that way.
So let's continue with this argument.
Okay.
So he's saying right-wing authoritarians are actually dangerous. So we have to
Yep.
figure this out. So how do people become authoritarian?
Okay.
So he goes through a bunch of different scenarios. You know, there's some Freudian explanations, which he ends up not liking because you can't measure it and it's
Yes.
too ambiguous. And
Psychometrists tend not to enjoy Freud.
yes. But one of the big things that he finds is that one of the biggest predictors of whether you're authoritarian is how diverse experiences you've had in your life.
Yes.
So when you grow up in a bubble, when everyone is like you, you tend to be higher on the authoritarianism scale. And people who grow up in the same kind of family where it's very authoritarian, but who have a more diverse group of friends, end up lower on the scale.
Yeah.
So the more you hang out with people who aren't like you, with people of other races, with people of other religions, the more you travel, the less likely you are to be high on the RWA scale. And so a lot of people just live in these bubbles. And if you think about it, isn't that what evangelicalism has tried to do?
Yeah. We even had our own music, our own T-shirts, our own companies, our own everything. Yep.
Yeah. And, you know, we tell people they need to go to Christian schools and then they need to go to youth groups and then they need to go to Christian universities.
And then they should probably get a job in ministry because don't you want to serve the Lord?
Right.
And I'm like, you'd never have to talk to an atheist in your life.
Yeah, exactly. And that tends to be very highly correlated with this. Okay. So you got people who are in these families that are teaching this stuff about how we need to submit to authority. And as I was reading this, I'm like, isn't this interesting? Because in She Deserves Better, before we even read any of this stuff, we were actually teaching people how to do the opposite.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
we were saying, hey, if your daughter is in a youth group and she's being taught, like she needs to be taught how not to just blindly follow authority.
Yes.
Like we actually showed you in She Deserves Better how to do that and how important that was if they're actually going to develop faith in Jesus, is that they can't just blindly follow authority.
Yeah.
So I just thought that was kind of funny.
Hey, you. Yes. You who's been listening to the podcast for a year or two already, who has not yet gotten The Great Sex Rescue or She Deserves Better, what are you waiting for? You know that they're good. You've been listening to us for weeks. It's time for you to understand what the fuss is all about. We hear from people all the time who say, listen, I've been listening to your podcast for 2 years and I finally read She Deserves Better and I had that breakthrough because it's put together in a completely different way than these podcasts are. So hey, stop putting it off. Buy our book. You know you like us already. So why don't you just head on over there and grab it?
Okay, another big thing, and this one really got me.
Okay.
Because I'm like, this is what we're dealing with.
Yes.
All right. Another big thing with people who are high in the RWA scale is that, and this is his words, not mine. Okay. RWAs don't think the same as everyone else, or rather they don't think much at all.
Yes.
And he gave an example.
Yeah.
Okay. He said he gave this scale to, or not, like this set of 3 premises. Okay.
Yeah.
Or whatever it is, to people.
Yeah, logical syllogism.
Yes. And it goes like this. All fish live in the sea. Sharks live in the sea. Therefore, sharks are fish.
Yes.
All right. And people who are high on the RWA scale are far more likely to say that that is logical and that follows.
Oh, that's hard. That's rough.
I know. It's like, oh my goodness. And the reason and he was like, how can people not see that this is, and as he dug down, what he found that the commonality was that if people agree with the conclusion, in this case, therefore sharks are fish, they just assume that the argument is correct. So, and that's what he found by forming like all kinds of different ones. It wasn't just this one. It was,
But the pattern was consistent. They didn't care about the facts. They only cared about whether or not it proved what they wanted to prove.
Exactly.
Can you say Shanti Felden
exactly.
and Love and Respect?
Exactly.
And Every Man's Battle and all of these things.
Yeah. If the conclusion was what they were hoping to see, they really didn't care about the argument and they didn't see the holes in the argument because they were just looking to validate what they already thought. And this happened over and over again.
And a really good way, I will say, a really good way to make sure that you aren't doing this is, and I wrote about this in a newsletter a while ago, is when's the last time you changed your mind? Right? So, and I'm not saying changing your mind about something very small. Like I used to not be okay with a certain style of worship music, but I think I'm coming around to it. Yeah. Like I'm talking about things that shatter your idea of how something works, right? Like when is the last time that you changed your mind on something that was a part of who you saw yourself as, right? I am this person who believes X. When have you changed your mind? Because everything in the world has changed in the last couple of years. So if you haven't had large areas where your mind has been changed or where you've learned new things and you've adjusted your worldview as a result, you're probably not paying attention to the evidence. Yeah. Like, I don't care what your beliefs are. No one is 100% right. And so my question is, when's the last time that you changed your mind about something big? When's the last time that you went from being fervently on side A to fervently on side B?
Yeah, I mean, this is a more minor one, but one of the big things I changed my mind on was obligation sex.
Yeah.
Like, I kind of taught that.
Yeah.
And then I saw our survey results for the Great Sex Rescue, and I'm like, oh boy, we have to rewrite everything and take posts down. And we did.
I mean, I've changed on virtually everything. I mean, I flip-flopped a couple of times because that's the thing too. Like, you have to change your mind. Like, it's like, where's the evidence pointing right now? Yes. Like, I mean, I've had a couple things where I've been like, I'm on this side, and the evidence is definitely pointing me to this side. And like, do you have a habit of changing your mind when new evidence is released? Or do you find yourself saying, no, I listen to all perspectives, but you haven't ever changed your mind? Because that's often what happens too, right? Like, they're like, no, I looked at the arguments are sound. No, because you looked at the conclusion of the arguments and chose the argument that fits your conclusion. Yeah. Right? When have you looked at a conclusion that you disagree with, but that's a stupid idea, and then read the evidence and said, oh no, I was stupid? Yeah. When did you do that? Yeah. And if you can't think about it, take the RWA test.
Yeah. And this doesn't mean like I don't want to shame people in this podcast. That's not my goal. No. But we do want to say, like, when we're trying to break through to this group of people that are really hurting women, especially, but hurting themselves too. Like, they're hurting marriage.
Well, and it's also, again, remember, the women who are in these authoritarian systems and being hurt by them are also authoritarian.
Also high RWAs. So
we just get messages from people all the time. I'll be very honest here. We get messages from people all the time that it's so clear they are like they're going to get like 148 on the RWA thing. Yeah. They're like so authoritarian. And they're like, you've changed my mind about obligation sex, but I'm still struggling in all these areas, and all this stuff is bad. And I'm like, it's because you're not out of it yet. Yeah. It's like, this is why we're talking about it, is because if you're picking away at the scab that is forming over the giant festering wound that's currently leaking out 1 liter of blood an hour, like, you're not, like, good job, you got a Band-Aid. And that's important, but let's deal with the underlying issue here. Yes. Right? Yes. Like, let's deal with why we are so willing to doom other people to a ton of hurt and abuse because, well, it's what the Bible says. And why are we willing to see other people suffering and see ourselves suffering and see our children suffering and do nothing because we want to be right and we want to be liked by the people who are in authority? Yeah. And why are we willing to verbally abuse and shun and condemn and actively try to harm in many ways the people who disagree with us, right? Yeah, so it's scary. That's just the question.
Okay, so they look at the conclusion and they ignore the arguments. Yeah. Okay. The other thing they do is they're really inconsistent. Okay, so here's how he measured this. He would present two completely opposing ideas in a story or in a scale and ask people if they agreed with them. Yeah. And as long as he presented them in like a folksy, homey way, people would agree with totally contradictory things. Right. So here's an example. Okay, here's the example he gives. He asked both students and their parents, because often he would survey like students and their parents because then he could see like it was super interesting. Anyway, to respond to, when it comes to love, men and women with opposite points of view are attracted to each other. And also, birds of a feather flock together when it comes to love.
That's so opposites attract and birds of a feather flock together is hilarious.
High RWAs typically agreed with both statements. Yes. Even though they responded to the two items within minutes of each other, whereas low
within
RWAs...
minutes of each other. It wasn't even like at the end of the session.
No, it was like
right beside each other. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
But low and medium RWAs did not. They would pick one or the other.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. But they don't, so here's the thing that he says. So they don't tend to scan for inconsistencies as much as other people do. And he especially found this in areas of hypocrisy. So he measured, and he would give people like long case studies of legal cases. And in one case, it would be somebody breaking the law in order to picket an abortion clinic. And in the other case, it would be someone breaking the law in order to have an abortion, right? And like people who were low RWAs or medium RWAs would have the same answer no matter what, like how you follow the law, because it's not about who does it, it's about the behavior. Whereas high RWAs would only punish the person who was having the abortion, not the person who was protesting. Yeah. So it's not about the behavior. It's about the person's viewpoint and who the person is. And they saw this like they would tend to punish poor people much harsher than rich people. They would punish minorities much harsher than majority, whereas low RWAs and medium RWAs did not. They just looked at the facts of the case. And this was consistent over all kinds of different experiments. Yeah. And then there was a really funny one where they asked about freedom of expression, like freedom of worship in school. Yes. So would you let a school specifically teach about Christianity and have people pray? And they said yes, because it's all about freedom of religion. But then if they said, if you were living in an Arab country and they wanted to teach your Christian kids about Islam, would that be okay? And they said, well, absolutely not.
Because freedom of religion.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas low RWAs would say both were wrong.
Yeah.
And medium RWAs would say both things were wrong.
Yeah. Very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's like, and the other funny thing I thought, this is just an aside he had, I think this was even in the notes, because I love this book. One of the reasons I love this book is that it is so darn accessible. It's funny. He's got little jokes in it, but then half the book is notes. And so if you actually want the academic part of it, you just read the notes. So he's written this specifically so that your average person can read the book and enjoy it and understand it. But the notes are super funny. And one thing that he had in the notes was that high RW people tended not to, like, if there was a movie where you're supposed to be rooting for the minority group, they wouldn't root for them. So in Dances with Wolves, you're supposed to be rooting for the Native Americans.
Yeah. Oh gosh.
But they didn't.
Oh no.
So anyway, then in chapter 3, he turns to politics, which we're not going to talk about too much, but I thought this was super interesting, which is low RWAs do not like it when politicians change their minds, when they flip-flop. Low RWAs are like, no, you need to be consistent. Or if you're going to change your mind, you need to explain why you changed your mind, and you need to have a principled reason for doing it. Yeah. Okay. High RWAs don't care if you change your mind as long as you're on my side.
Yes.
And so if you are a demagogue who wants to get power, it is so much easier to try to get the RWAs on your side than the low RWAs on your side. Because with the high RWAs, all you have to do is say slogans.
Yes.
And they'll follow you.
Yeah.
Because it's not about consistency. It's about
group
argument.
It's about being part of the right group so that you can keep having power, because it's authoritarian.
So he says this. So suppose you are a completely unethical, dishonest, power-hungry, dirtbag, scumbucket politician who will say whatever he has to say to get elected. And I apologize for putting you in this role, but it will only last for one more sentence. Whom are you going to try to lead? High RWAs or low RWAs? Isn't it obvious? The easy sell high RWAs will open up their arms and wallets to you if you just sing their song, however poor your credibility. Those crabby low RWAs, on the other hand, will eye you warily when your credibility is suspect because you sing their song. So the scumbucket politicians will usually head for the right-wing authoritarians because the right-wing authoritarians hunger for social endorsement of their beliefs so much that they're apt to trust anyone who tells them they're right.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we see in churches too, right? We see a lot of these big pastors will say the right things, or they'll endorse the right kinds of it's all this group what's the word? Group signaling, right? Like in-group signaling kind of stuff, where it's like, well, we believe in the gospel, and then they can tell you whatever the gospel is. That's why you have all these like these crazy mega churches who all say they believe the gospel. And you have people who will hop mega church to mega church that have wildly different theology and wildly different beliefs, and they don't see a difference.
Mark Driscoll switched from Reformed to Charismatic.
Like, those are very different. Those are very different, But his followers are still like, yeah, that's fine. Because Mark's on my team, right? And I mean, I know people in this town who have gone to the Baptist church, the Pentecostal church, and and also like the more Authoritarian Presbyterian church, and and all of them have very different beliefs, guys, and they just don't even notice the consistency. They just don't care. They don't care because the only things that matter are about the in-group power structures. That's the only thing that has to remain consistent, is that they get to stay better than other people. And I know that sounds harsh, but that's what I realized about myself when I did my deconstructionism, was also realizing that I got to accept that being a Christian didn't mean that I had to see religious people as morally superior to other people. And that was a really big and freeing thing, because I didn't actually enjoy that, because it always felt like a cognitive distance for me, because it's like, I just don't think that what we believe is what makes us moral. I believe that following Jesus and following the way of God is what makes us moral people, and that it's important that our beliefs line up with our actions, and that knowing truth is important for truth's sake, but it's not like little meritocracy badges where it's like, I'm a better person than you because I have the right theology. I just don't believe that anymore. And I think that's a much more biblical message anyway, where it's about a combination of knowing what is true and doing what is true, and the morality and salvation are different things, and this all gets very complicated. But this is a big thing that I was always raised with at especially the Baptist church and the Alliance church that we were a part of, right? And this is not the same for every single one, but the ones in our...
And it wasn't every leader.
It wasn't every leader in those churches, but this is a thing that's very common in very missions-focused churches especially, is this idea that there are the lost and we are the found. Right. And seeing people through that lens of people who are lost and need to be reached, who are sinners, versus those of us who have the answer, versus seeing it much more humbly. I think that can be really freeing, actually, where, your job is to, yes, be a light that shines, be the salt of the earth, be the presence ambassador of Christ on this world. And that doesn't mean that you need to hand out tracts and tell people they're going to hell, and they're not allowed to have that food, by the way, unless they say the sinner's prayer first. Right?
So. Yeah. No, very true. Okay. So, and I just want to reiterate too, like what you're saying is about religion. He's talking about politics. We're going to get to religion in a minute, but it overlaps so much.
Sorry, that's why I'm flip-flopping.
Because it does overlap. I want to read a few more quotes that I think are really important about the politics before we move on. But he said, and again, please remember 2006, once someone becomes a leader of the high RWA's in-group, he can lie with impunity about the out-groups, himself, whatever, because he knows the followers will seldom check on what he says, nor will they expose themselves to people who set their record straight. Furthermore, they will not believe the truth if they somehow get exposed to it, and if the distortions become absolutely undeniable, they will rationalize it away and put it in a box. If the scoundrel's duplicity and hypocrisy lands him on the front page of every daily in the country, the followers will still forgive him if he just says the right things.
Yeah.
And this is, and I think that there's a tendency today to say, well, everybody's like that, because we've become so polarized, and we both just hunker down and don't like, and just believe whatever our side says. But that's actually not what the data says.
No, it's not what the data says.
Is that high RWAs, and as we'll look at in a minute, there are some high RWAs across the political spectrum, but they tend to be in one part of it. High RWAs don't change their minds, whereas the other ones do.
Yeah.
The other ones, like if you give them a good reason to change their mind, they will.
There's also, I will be honest, like when we look at the church, I'm sorry to bring it back to religion, but let's bring it back to religion. There is a whole group of people who are in that group because they changed their minds.
Yeah.
Like the deconstructionist, more progressive kind of moderate Christian space is full of people who are there because they changed their minds. The people who haven't changed their minds and won't change their minds, and there's all this evidence, and they can see that they're hurting people, and people are saying there are people being raped and abuse happening, and who still won't change their minds, are still in the conservative churches, like in the right-wing churches. They just are. Like there is a self-selection bias here too, where it's like people who change their minds are no longer welcome in one area, but are still welcome in the other. There is so much diversity of thought in much more like evangelical spaces than people like to believe there is. There really is. There's people who are from all sorts. We have people who are Catholic, who are Anglican, who are still Baptist, but just can't find a church to go to, who are like Mennonite, who are like, there's wide variety over here who believe very different things. And there's a lot more uniformity Because there's not a lot of things that are like make it or break it.
Yeah.
On the lower authoritarian group. It's like, okay, you can believe that and I don't agree with you.
Yeah.
But like you don't have to like leave.
Yeah. Yeah. So and I want to read two more things he says about politics, but as I'm reading it, please think of it not really in terms of politics, but in terms of evangelicalism, because I think it applies there too. Okay? So he says, when you haven't figured out your beliefs, but instead absorbed them from other people, you're really in no position to defend them from attack. Simply put, you don't know why the things you believe are true. Somebody else decided they were, and you're taking their word for it. So what do you do when you're challenged? And this is what we see all the time with people debating complementarianism and egalitarianism, is people just say, well, the Bible teaches complementarianism.
Yeah. Or, well, you just need a tiebreaker. It's like,
Yeah.
well, why?
Yeah. And they don't know how to answer it. And so then he says, well, first of all, you avoid challenges by sticking with your own kind as much as possible, because they're hardly likely to ask pointed questions about your beliefs.
Yes.
But if you meet someone who does, you'll probably defend your ideas as best that you can, parrying thrusts with whatever answers your authorities have preloaded into your head. And I'm just remembering all the youth groups where they taught you what to say when someone challenges your beliefs. And like, we had to learn all these scripts, right? And most of them didn't make a lot of sense.
Yep.
They were really shallow. They wouldn't pass any logic test.
A lot of them were that sharks example.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah.
If these defenses crumble, you may go back to the trusted sources. They probably don't have to give you a convincing refutation of the anxiety-producing argument that breached your defenses, just the assurance that you are nonetheless right. But if the arguments against you become overwhelming and persistent, you either concede the point, which may put the whole thing at risk, or you simply insist that you are right and you walk away clutching your beliefs more tightly than ever.
Yeah. And that's often what we see is people.
And this is what we're up against.
Yeah, that is. Yeah.
This is exactly what we're up against.
And that's why it's so hard, because then, and I also want to say, like, this is, I've had this conversation with a lot of people, especially our sweet patrons who, you know, talk to their pastors repeatedly about this stuff and they just don't care. And they think that there's, well, if I just bring them the evidence, they care. And I want this to be freeing for you.
Yeah.
Be like, your pastor is just a super high authoritarian and they've been given the information. They don't care.
Yeah.
And it's not that you haven't said the argument correctly. It's not that you didn't present them with enough evidence. It's that they have chosen that in the face of evidence, they're just going to clutch onto their beliefs anyway and not care. And we can pray that later that changes, but it's not your fault if someone doesn't want to look at evidence.
It really isn't, because for a lot of people, being in the in-group is more important than anything to do with logic, or than listening to Jesus' words that a good tree can't bear bad fruit and a bad tree can't bear good fruit. They literally don't care, because to them, it's all about my self-identity as being part of this righteous. And if that goes, everything goes. And that's why people are so afraid of deconstructionism, because you know that if you pull one string, if we pull the string of, hey, women matter during sex too, that's going to also pull complementarianism. And if we pull complementarianism, that's going to pull the idea that church leaders are in authority over their people. And if we pull that, like it pulls at everything.
It pulls at everything.
Right.
Yeah.
And so often people are afraid to even go to the, hey, women matter during sex, because it's going to have all these cascading effects, because everything is not logically consistent.
No, it literally is a house of cards.
It really is a house of cards. And one of the ways that I often find that you can tell if someone is willing to change their mind is you say to them something like, what could someone do to change your mind about X? Like, what would it take to change your mind about complementarianism? Or what would it take to not go to your church anymore? Like, what would your pastor have to do for you to say this isn't of God? And often they can't give you anything.
Yeah.
There's nothing they can do. And they're actually proud there's nothing they can do. Because no, I am standing firm. I am not going to budge. I am defending the gospel. I am standing on God's word. And it's like, okay, but what if it's not? But they can't even imagine it.
Yep.
You know? Okay. So then the book turns to religion.
Yes.
And this was so super interesting. So they had a religious fundamentalism quiz.
Yes.
It was a 12-question scale. Did you take that one too?
Yes, I did.
Okay, what did you score?
33.
33. Yeah. Okay. I was 44. And Dad was 43. Yeah. So I was the highest. No, I thought Dad was going to be the highest and I was going to be the middle and you were going to be the bottom in all of them, but I was actually the highest. So
I don't think that surprised me and Dad.
Yeah.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. It was just right there.
Yeah. So the average American evangelical scores 93.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah. And so we scored quite low. This was something that wasn't in the text. This was in a note too. And I thought this was so interesting. Okay, so one of the things they were trying to measure in their scale was militancy. Okay. And here's how they were trying to measure it. They were asking people if they agreed with the statement. God's true followers must remember that he requires them to constantly fight Satan and Satan's allies on this earth.
Okay, yes.
And what they found was that in Canada, that was not related to the others.
That's
it was
so funny.
It was not an accurate. It didn't go along with the others, but in America it did. So
because we're much more pacifist.
So they took it out of the scale because
That's
it's University
funny.
of Manitoba. But yeah, so they couldn't measure because in Canada the militancy didn't go along with religious fundamentalism.
Yeah.
It wasn't an accurate predictor.
Yeah.
I wonder if that's changed since. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if it now is. Because
I don't think so.
You know?
And I really still don't think so.
Okay.
I think Canada's culture is still quite different. Again, like we're such a smaller area that to go against people is to go against neighbors.
Yeah.
Right? So.
Okay, but here's here's the point. Here is the major thing that I want you to hear is that evangelicals, there is no difference between evangelicals and fundamentalists.
Yeah.
And scoring high on the fundamentalist quiz is almost perfectly related to scoring high on the authoritarian.
Yep.
So these things are all the same thing, which is horrifying to me.
Yep.
Absolutely horrifying to me.
Yep. And it's just this again, it doesn't need to be a point of like the idea of shame being like you're a terrible person as much as a hey, we're in a bad rut. Like you're in a bad habit here. You have like our brains have been trained to be authoritarian, to be harmful to others, to be aggressive, to be the antithesis
self-righteous. He talks about self-righteousness so much.
The antithesis of the fruits of the spirit are all present in the outcomes of what these scales predict. So if you take this scale and you're like, ooh, I got like an 87 on the religious fundamentalism scale, that's just a really good point that you might need to start reading books and theology takes from people who are outside of your camp of Christianity. Like maybe read some stuff by more progressive Christians and you can be like, but then I might agree with them. I'm like, but you don't have to. But why are you so afraid of just listening to viewpoints that are different? Like if you're read books that are put out by people who work with the homeless who are from a more progressive viewpoint versus who are from a very right-wing viewpoint. Because you might be interested even just seeing how people are discussed differently and talking about systemic issues and stuff. And again, you don't have to agree with everything, but you do have to get used to the idea of hearing different viewpoints, actually weighing them, allowing them to influence what you believe, and not being closed off to evidence. Because you can still say, I think that I still believe in a more conservative approach to XYZ. However, I understand this. That's different than you just think everyone should get a handout and you think that
that's where I started from.
Yes.
That's actually how I started evolving, was like, no, I still agree with the conservative political take on this, but I can see why they're saying this.
Yeah.
And then over time, I've kept some of my conservative beliefs and some of them I've adopted these ones. Like I'm kind of all over the place. I don't think people could correctly predict where I am on multiple things, but I'm always reading about, okay, what actually works? Yeah. What policies actually work?
Yep. And same and that's what we do with religion too, right? Like, that's what we're doing with the church. It's like, okay, these things didn't work though. Like these didn't work. And so how can we look at the data and change what we believe so that it's more in line with with where we see Jesus moving, right? Versus us being like, well, this is what we believe, so this must be where Jesus is moving.
Yes, like, exactly. That's the difference. That's the difference. Is like just because in authoritarian churches and in authoritarian spaces, they put belief first. You have to believe exactly these things, and then you will be doing what God wants and God will be happy with you. Yeah. Whereas in other places we say, well, no, God says they'll know us by our love. Jesus says they'll know us by our love. So we need to put our actions first and then see, okay, which beliefs line up with these kinds of actions?
Yep. Like what does what I believe about God influence about how I treat my neighbor?
Yeah, exactly. Because it should go together, right? And
do I have to rationalize away the way that I'm talking about a certain group of people, the way that I'm treating a certain group of people, the beliefs and the beliefs that I have about certain groups of people? Do I have to just hide things that I believe when I meet up with people in my community who are outside of my Christian in-group because I know that it's actually quite shameful and harmful to them? Or can I very openly discuss what I believe because I know that they're going to be able to respect where we have differences, but I'm not coming at this from a place of I am morally superior and you are the damned.
Yep. And that's a hard place to be when you've grown up in a totally different.
Yeah. How do you just have your neighbors not be your enemies? Yeah. Even if they don't look like you, act like you, think like you, how do you see them as not your enemies?
Yeah. Because Jesus didn't. No. Jesus did not see them as his enemies. So again, remember, I'm going to summarize the book again, just so that you know the argument that we've made. He's saying that right-wing authoritarians tend to end up doing, they're more likely to support leaders who will then harm people and who will do global harm and who will hurt. And so this is an ideology or a personality or whatever you want to call it that we do need to fight against and guard against.
Yeah.
And the problem is that evangelicalism and religious fundamentalism, like evangelicalism is religious fundamentalism. Not all religious fundamentalism is evangelicalism. So you can have, Hindu religious fundamentalists, you can have Jewish religious fundamentalists, etc. Okay. But evangelicals tend to be religious fundamentalists, and religious fundamentalists tend to be high RWAs. It's all like one big circle. Okay. Not even a Venn diagram. Like it's just one big circle. And so what that means is like when evangelicals take that global test, you end up in nuclear war. Like, what is that saying about us?
Yep. And I think it really just comes down to, do you see your neighbor as your enemy or your brother?
Yeah.
If you're looking for a tangible way to change the conversation, make sure that for the next wedding shower that you attend, you get a copy of The Good Girl's Guide to Great Sex and The Good Guy's Guide to Great Sex, because these are the books that will change the conversation for the next generation of married couples, introducing healthy, evidence-based, and biblical teachings from the get-go, instead of having to wade through that toxic garbage for years before you finally find the Great Sex Rescue. So, for the engaged couples in your life, why not get them the guides?
Yeah. Okay. So I want to read, he's talking about evangelicals now specifically. Okay. Because chapter 4 is about evangelicals. And he's referring to a book that I've talked about in this podcast before, The Scandal of the Evangelical Mind, which was written, I think, 25 years ago. So it was written before he wrote this, and he talks about it. And he quotes the author saying, "The scandal of the evangelical mind is that there is not much of an evangelical mind." Noel observes that American evangelicals are not exemplary for their thinking, and they have not been so for several generations. He points out that evangelicals support dozens of theological seminaries, scores of colleges, and hundreds of radio stations, but not a single research university. In the United States, he writes, it is simply impossible to be, with integrity, both evangelical and intellectual. Modern American evangelicals have failed notably in sustaining serious intellectual life.
Yep. All the evangelicals who are serious about, like, being intellectuals that you have to get outside of the Christian area. Like you can become a renowned Christian researcher like Nancy Pearcey.
Yeah.
Right.
Without doing any proper citations.
But also without being able to do the bare minimum that is required at a secular campus. Right. So this is the issue, right? It shouldn't be this way, though. There is nothing about religion that makes you less able to think. But there is something about fundamentalist religion that actively rewards you for turning off your logic.
Because what it's trying to do is enforce the group think, enforce power structures. And to do that, it has to make sure that you don't get any information from outside. And that's what's going on. And so when he did all kinds of different experiments and different quizzes with people who scored differently on religious fundamentalism quizzes. And one of the things he found was that atheists were really consistent. Okay. So if you asked atheists if it was okay to legislate that schools teach that there is no God, 100% of atheists in his Manitoba sample said no. So atheists are like, no, you can't teach my religion to children.
Yeah.
Right? But evangelicals are saying, yes, it's fine to teach my religion to
But
children.
it wouldn't be okay to teach your religion. Yeah.
And then when they asked, okay, so imagine there is a child from your neighborhood who is of a different religion, and they come over to your house and they have questions. Is it okay to tell that child that their parents' religion is wrong?
Mm-hmm.
And atheists or people who scored low on the religious fundamentalism scale said, no, that's not okay.
Yeah.
But people who scored high says it is. And I mean, that's what we were all taught, right? That the most important thing is to save people. So how could that not be okay?
Exactly.
And it's like, well, we can talk about, and that is a difficult thing. If you do believe that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, how do we get away from that? But we need to realize that we think, well, we do this, but atheists do it too. They actually don't. Yes. They're actually consistent and more moral about this than evangelicals if you just look at human rights. And so that is something that we need to grapple with, Okay, then there was something that he called dogmatism, which is whether you hold on to a belief no matter what. And he did this experiment where he would show students the different gospel accounts of one thing and how they differed from one another. And he found that evangelicals would consistently dismiss any differences and say there were no differences, even if there were glaring differences in the accounts. And so he says this: when confronted with different accounts of the same thing, they use the car accident or witnesses analogy a lot. So you know how the whole thing about how, well, if you witness a car accident, everyone sees something different. And so that's what's going on with the Gospels, right?
Yes.
And he says this: ultimately, true believers were saying, I believe so strongly that the Bible is perfect that there's nothing, not even the Bible itself, that can change my mind.
Yeah. We've run into that a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's when people need to start listening to the Bible for Normal People podcast. Yeah. Okay. I've almost finished what I want to say about this book, but I do want to read this long excerpt.
Okay.
Which is good. Okay. You will sometimes hear fundamentalists dismiss science because of its apparent uncertainty. They observe that today's scientific explanation of something will sooner or later be replaced by a different one, so why invest anything in it? Their religion already has the final word, they say, the perfect explanation of everything. This view is 3 players short of a trio. First, it does not grasp that future theories in science will be accepted because they make superior explanations and predictions, which is progress you could not make if you insisted the old theory was perfect. As well, science energetically corrects itself. If a finding is misleading, say due to methodological error, other scientists will discover that and set things straight. Every year, a new batch of scientists graduate, and many of them take dead aim, as they were trained to do, on the scientific establishment. In religion, you might get branded a heretic or worse for challenging dogma. In science, you'll get promoted and gather research grants as ye may if you knock an established explanation off its perch.
It's very true.
Orthodoxy has a big bullseye planted on it in science. A scientist who can come up with a better account of things than evolution will become immortal.
Yes. Well, I mean, that's why we got, that's why our paper was accepted so quickly into such a great journal, is because we actually disrupted the status quo belief in sociology of religion. Yeah. About specifically complementarianism and pragmatic egalitarianism.
Yeah, because the belief that we were critiquing came from Sally Gallagher, who did a huge study in the early aughts, where she said that the majority of evangelicals practice symbolic headship. So they say they believe in headship, but it's more just a marker of, hey, we do marriage different from the world. Yeah. But they practice egalitarianism. Yeah, so
they say they do marriage different than the rest of the world, but they don't actually. And then, and that's been the reigning theory for a long time.
But then we showed that doesn't apply with sex.
Yeah, no, they actually are doing some things very differently, and it's very bad.
Yes. Yeah. And that's why we were accepted.
Yeah. Because we proved everyone wrong. They like being proved wrong in science, friends.
Okay, he goes on to look at how many people leave the faith. He looks at when fundamentalists leave the faith, it tends to be about hypocrisy and they can't believe anymore. So people are starting to question their beliefs.
Yep, that's great.
Yeah. And then there were 2 quick things that I thought were super interesting that he found in fundamentalism. The first is that fundamentalists tend to have little guilt when they do something wrong.
Yes, that makes sense.
Because
we've been learned to rationalize.
Yeah,
you can do anything if the ends justify the means.
And also, all you need to do is confess, and Jesus forgives you, which is true. Whereas atheists tend to say, "Well, how can I make amends? How can I and how can I become a different person?" So it's kind of an interesting thing. The other thing is fundamentalists don't actually read or know their Bible.
Oh.
very well. So he does this test, and the average score is 60% among evangelicals, a super easy religious quiz. So for instance, it's a 4-question quiz. Okay. So where in the Bible would you find the passage, in that region there were shepherds living in their fields, keeping watch over their flock by night. Then the angel of the Lord shone around them. Yeah. And people would say and they were given the Gospel of Luke, the book of Jeremiah, the Psalms, or Genesis.
Oh, did they say Jeremiah? What did they say?
Yeah, well, that was one of them. Okay, here's another one. Is the story of Samson and Delilah in Exodus, Matthew, Apostles, or Judges?
Oh my gosh, no, Judges. But
most people said Acts.
Oh.
Okay, here, I'm just going to give you another quote.
Okay.
Okay. For God so loved the world that he gave his
my
only
gosh,
son.
No.
This is the one people were most likely to get correct.
Okay,
So,
good.
Which book?
John 3:16.
And then this one, if I speak in the tongues of men and of angels.
1 Corinthians 13:1.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the average evangelical only got 60%
Oh, wow.
on tests like that.
That's wild.
Yeah. So that's only 4. There were other questions that were like that, but the average evangelical only scored 60%.
That's wild.
Yeah. So again, it really is more about being in the in-group and feeling righteous than it is about actually knowing God, actually knowing the Bible.
Well, and this is also what we found in various areas, right? The people who are the staunchest, who actually do the stuff, who actually do read their Bibles, who really study, who really care about this, often leave.
Yeah.
Because they actually have enough information to see the holes in the argument.
Yeah. And because they actually fall in love with Jesus.
Yep, a lot of times that's what happens too, and also because most people, I think it's something. If you want to keep someone in a cult forever, they just have to believe 80%, right? Because if you believe too much of it, then you actually care enough that if something falls apart, it wrecks you. Yeah. Versus if you're like, well, it was always kind of a little bit fishy, so I'm fine. It's still working out for me. So it's totally different.
Yeah. Okay, there's 2 more chapters. It's the final one I really want to talk about.
Okay.
But I do need to mention what the 5th chapter is, which is it is about the leaders. So he does talk about the leaders because we've been talking about the followers so far.
Yes.
Leaders are very different because the whole point of a follower is that they're going to be submissive.
Yes.
To the one in leadership. Leaders do not want to be submissive. They want to be dominating.
Yes.
Okay. So they're very, very, very different. They believe that they are the best. They believe they just want to dominate and have power over. It's very rare that people score really high on both things. But when you do score really high on both things, guess what you are?
Pastor.
An evangelical.
Yeah, okay, there you go.
Right? So again, you're getting mega church pastors.
High submission and high dominance.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to be in power and I want to be in leadership. So very scary when you get these things together. Yeah. Okay? Yeah, he calls them double highs and they tend to be overwhelmingly religious. And he talks about playing that whole global thing game with the double highs. And it was absolutely, bad. It was super bad. It was super, super bad. So then his final chapter is so what do we do? And this is really where I'm landing is what do we do? Is there any hope? Yeah. How do we get through to people who are high RWAs? Yeah. And the good news is he actually has some ideas and which has made me think that perhaps we've gone about this a little bit wrong. And I want to switch things up a little bit in how we talk about things. But one of them is that the more high RWAs get to know people outside of their group, the more likely they are to change. Yeah. Because it's so based on being insular.
Yeah. Well, we've talked about that a lot.
Right.
But you need to make new friends.
And the good news is that, and I'm going to read this. People often think that low RWAs are all atheists and agnostics, but they're not. 62% of the low RWAs in my big 2005 parent study said they were members of some religion, typically liberal Protestants or Catholics. A solid majority of moderates are religious too, and often churchgoers as well. Often people who believe in God and have religious inclinations are not high RWAs, and they are well positioned to broaden those who are. So this is up to us. If we're going to get through to the high RWAs, it has to be people who are not
scary to them because we're also Christian.
Right. And we know the Bible. Yeah. Education plays a huge part.
Yes.
So the more education people have, the lower they tend to score. So going to university tends to take you down by about 15 points.
Good. Yeah.
that may not necessarily be true for Christian institutions, though.
Oh, I highly doubt that it's true for Christian institutions.
So what do we do? Logic doesn't always work. I still think it's important to give arguments, because we do give arguments. We do give data. Our books are full of charts.
Here's the thing. Arguments work, I imagine, for the people who have already who are already leaving the RWA.
And who are already finding the cognitive dissonance.
That's exactly it.
This is supposed to help me. I'm supposed to have this amazing marriage because I'm a Christian, and I'm not.
Yes. It's not going to help. This is what I was saying earlier. It's not going to help you with the pastor who has no reason to change his mind. Yes. It does help for the literally thousands of women who are listening who used to be RWAs. This
is what I wanted to say.
Yes.
Is that giving your pastor stats, if your pastor is a Mark Driscoll, they're just going to ignore it. Care. This is why we haven't gotten through. This is why, because I honestly thought, hey, all I have to do is show Gary Thomas and Shanti Feldon and Emerson Eggerichs. All I have to do is show them the stats, and they will change their mind. But none of them ever did.
No, you have to wait until they start changing their mind, and then you're like, hey, I can offer you cognitive, I can offer you a freedom from that cognitive dissonance here, because I have the stats to show you what's actually going on.
So it's still important to share the stats, but who we share them with matters. And so if you share them with someone who just ignores them, and you're like, how can you blow this off? This is so obvious. And you're like, I just don't get it. How can you blow it off? It's because
they're authoritarian.
They're authoritarian, and they don't think in terms of logic like we do. They think in terms of what's the conclusion that I'm supposed to believe, and then it really doesn't matter what else you say.
Yeah.
Right? But what really makes a difference is meeting people who aren't like you, but who still share a lot of your values. So when people who are low RWAs can talk about Jesus, when we can talk about what scriptures say, when we can show, hey, I love Jesus, I follow the gospel, but when I read Ephesians 5, I see something different. And this is why I think it's actually a beautiful passage, but it doesn't mean power and authority. That is actually more likely to get people to listen often than some of the other arguments, because what they're hearing is, you still love the Bible. Because that's what they're so caught up in is, no, I am standing on the Bible. I believe the Bible.
I think I would see it differently, because I think that there's enough dog whistle training in these areas that would even feel like logic.
Yeah, maybe.
I think it's much more about just showing them, I disagree with you, and then not arguing. Yeah. I think people are not used to having people in their life who disagree with them. Who openly disagree with them. Like, yeah, I completely disagree with you. I think that's an incredibly dangerous and harmful way of thinking. We don't need to talk about it, because we're not going to convince each other. But you should know I'm not on the same wavelength there. Yeah. And then just move on.
Yeah.
I think that could also help for some people, because like, I know, I when I was in my very fervent, zealous evangelical self, right? Like earlier on in university, a lot of the reasons why you have that RWA score just knocked down when you're in university is you just get to know so many people who think completely differently than you, who just treat you wonderfully.
Yeah.
Like I had the just most wonderful support system and friends and coworkers and co-researchers in many areas where we saw things completely differently, you know, and I just was still loved, you know, and now to be fair, I was not spitting hateful, abusive, absolute pig poop. The Apostle Paul used a stronger word in the Bible, by the way, than that, at them. And I was not proselytizing, and I was not being cruel to them. You know, and so we could have a respectful relationship. And then I found myself realizing that a lot of the stuff that I believed didn't make sense.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that a lot of that happens for a lot of people. And so I'm not saying don't call people out. I'm saying call them out, but don't try to do logic with people who are trained to avoid logic.
Yeah.
Just let them sit in that discomfort of this person that I love and who likes me and who I'm friends with thinks that this is a bad thing to think.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and it's important that we speak up, and it's important that we call out. You are not supposed to keep the peace with authoritarians. Like, you're not supposed to do that. You are not supposed to capitulate. You're not supposed to pat them on the back, make them feel good about themselves. Like, in essence, we need to parent a lot of the authoritarians where it's like, that's not acceptable, and then just move along.
Yeah.
Right? But punitive measures, they are trained to see that as proof that they are the other and that they themselves are proper.
Yeah.
Right?
So
see,
when they get, when people cut them off, then they're being persecuted and they're on the right side. Yeah.
So it's just.
But I'll tell you, there has been 2 moments on the Bare Marriage podcast that were so powerful that I keep having people talk about and refer back. And it's when we were doing something a little bit different. One was a recent podcast episode with Marg Mausko from Australia. And she just started talking about what Jesus means to her and what the gospel means to her. So she wasn't really making scriptural arguments. She wasn't, trying to refute anyone. She was just sharing her heart about how much she loved Jesus. And it was really powerful. And the other was a couple of years ago now when I had Taryn Williams on.
I was going to say, probably Taryn, yeah.
Yeah. And he was sharing, and he actually broke down crying of when he finally realized egalitarianism was true and he saw his wife and he realized what it meant. That she was his equal, and that God, and it was like, it was so powerful to him. And those were powerful moments because they weren't based on logic, but they were just based on, this is something that's so beautiful. And I think people respond to beauty. I think people respond to that yearning to be known, to be intimate, to both with each other and with God. And so, as we are thinking about how to be more strategic, I want to figure out how to bring more moments like that into the podcast where we do get excited about what God is doing. Because sometimes I do lean more on the logic side, and it's really interesting to hear how logic doesn't work.
Well, with these people, logic does work with people who are looking for a new logical framework in which to build their belief system.
Yeah, because
and that's really what we do.
Yeah.
Like, we collect the strays that are kicked out of Baptist churches.
Right.
That's what we do. You are all our stray kittens. Yeah. And, here, have some data. But I think this is a big thing to realize, is that people in different spots, people who are at different layers in the journey, are going to respond to different things. And so we're going to try to figure out how to try to be not, again, and I can't emphasize this enough, not not patronizing to authoritarians, not capitulating to them, not being like, you're welcome here just as you are, because they're not. It is not welcome to be authoritarian here. You are welcome to listen, and you are welcome to be a part of our podcast. We're never going to say that way of thinking is just as valid as any other way of thinking. It is not. It's proven by everyone to not be. If you use even basic logic, it's not. But at the same time, you as a person, if you are someone who is authoritarian, are welcome to listen, are welcome to learn, are welcome to, wrestle with what we're saying and decide if you agree or not. And we just hope that through listening, we can get these people to start engaging in logic in a way that they maybe have been trained not to.
Yeah. So that's some of what I was thinking. So please, this book is fun. It is not incredibly long.
I mean, the guy is funny.
When you look at the page numbers, I think there's like 250. Just remember, half of that is endnotes. And so it isn't a long read. You can take the 2 quizzes on religious fundamentalism and RWA and see where you fit, and see where you fit. And then just, comment. Wherever you watch the podcast, comment on YouTube, comment on our post for this podcast on Facebook or on Substack or on our blog, and tell us what you think. What can help get through to people who just aren't there yet?
And if you were someone who was in the authoritarian mind space, what helped you get out? Yeah,
because I would love to read some of those on future podcasts. Next week, we have a special guest. We have Professor Neil, who is an Instagram, TikTok personality who does stitches, especially of some Christian pastors, and shows how what they're saying is completely bonkers. And so we'll talk about how he's trying to change the conversation. And we have a lot of interesting podcasts coming up. And we are going to talk about menopause, I think, in September. So many people have asked me to talk about menopause. I'm getting some panels ready. We're going to have some fun with that one. So that's what's coming in season 9. Thank you so much for joining us. Remember, please check out our books. The Marriage You Want, The Great Sex Rescue, She Deserves Better. She Deserves Better is such a good book for helping your teenagers not get pulled into authoritarianism in their church. Go through it's got exercise at the end of each chapter that you can do with your kids, things that you can talk to your kids about, and it can help prevent some of this stuff in your own family. So check that out, and we will see you again next week on the Bare Marriage Podcast. Bye-bye. Bye.